All right, as that summit is well underway, Iran and the remaining signatories to the 2015 nuclear deal are meeting in Vienna to try to salvage the deal. The talks come after Tehran announced it will hold back on the threat to breach the enriched uranium limit. Today, world leaders are pushing for a resolution. RT's Peter Oliver explains.
Well, the Iranian side are saying this is the last chance saloon for the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal. We understand that should they go over that limit, it's pretty much curtains for the whole nuclear deal. We expect it to fall apart. And that's why people have come here from all different sides, still part of the deal, to try and hammer out a solution here in Vienna. What we understand, though, is going to be put forward by the European side is a shot in the arm, a financial shot in the arm to the Instex system. Now, this was put in place and backed up by Germany, France and the United Kingdom to try and shield Iranian companies and European companies from crippling US sanctions on doing business with Iran, essentially allowing them to circumvent those sanctions and continue to do trade with the Iranian side. What we've been hearing from the Europeans, they're desperate to see a diplomatic solution to the impasse over the Iran deal with Tehran.
The paradox is that we see an international community, or some of them, that is becoming more tender with the one who already has nuclear weapons and who is threatening, and harder with Iran, whose activity has already been controlled since 2015. Where is the coherence?
The strategy of maximum pressure can be the right one, because one of the consequences is that we are all talking about how serious the situation is, and that there is a danger of war. This is the time for diplomacy. We have to ensure that these tensions are reduced, because otherwise any event without it being clear who caused it could lead to a spiral of violence that ends in a war.
Well, that's the European view. The United States has a very different view on the situation, following attacks on oil tankers that Washington has blamed on Tehran and the shooting down of a US drone over the Gulf. This has led to an increasing animosity between Washington and Tehran.
Iran's hostile actions are an international problem that affect many nations. But let me be clear. The United States does not seek war with Iran. In focused conversations with allies, I discussed the need to internationalize this issue by encouraging NATO allies and regional partners to voice their opposition to Iran's bad behavior and to help us deter further provocative acts.
Well, the meeting here in Austria is set to get underway around noon local time. Any developments come out of that, of course, I'll be bringing them to you here on RT.
All right, for more on Iran, let's turn now to former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, always good to see you.
Likewise.
So the U.S. Special Envoy for Iran, Brian Hook, just told Europeans and all other allies that the U.S. will sanction any country that imports Iranian oil, full stop, no exemptions. How do you see that being accepted by the EU?
Well, you heard the comments by the French president, the German foreign minister, basically saying that this maximum pressure is leading to a disaster, and would the Americans please stop? But the question is, will the Europeans grow the backbone or other body organs necessary to tell us to get lost? And they're not going to do that. If they're forced to choose, and if they're under threat of sanctions by Washington, they'll fold like a house of cards, like they always do, even though it's not in their national self-interest to do that. And this Instex system that's been set up, it's not capable of handling oil exports, evidently, just smaller transactions. And Washington can easily threaten that platform as well. As far as what we heard in the news report, too, about the Iranians going over the limits on enriched uranium, that's largely itself due to American sanctions, which won't let them export the rich uranium, so they'd have to go over the limits and scuttle the deal with the Europeans as well.
So in that same setting, Hook laid out the U.S. case on preventing Iran from establishing this, as they call it, a chokehold on vital international shipping lanes. Let's listen to Mr. Hook.
Under international maritime law, vessels have required since 2004 to use these transponders to broadcast their identity and location. A large number of Iranian tankers have recently disabled their maritime transponders and have effectively gone dark. We should not be surprised that an outlaw regime also violates basic maritime law.
Do you buy that they're playing dirty?
I think they're playing dirty. I mean, come on here. I mean, what are the Iranians trying to do? They're trying to export their oil. That's what they say. That's what the rest of the world, that's the Chinese, the Japanese want from Iran,
right.
That they want to do business. They're turning off their transporter. Who's causing a crisis in the Persian Gulf? Who's creating a security risk for all countries there? It's these threats against Iran by the United States and our allies like Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates. We wouldn't be in this crisis, and I don't know the proximate reason the Iranians are turning off their transponders, but it's because there's this crisis going on. And you punch somebody in the face and then tell him how ugly he is. That's what's going on here.
Well, meanwhile, Iran has been reaching out to the EU and telling them that it's the EU, that they have a chance to save what's left of the JCPOA. Does all this that we've just talked about here, does it really render the EU essentially feckless to tamp down tensions between the U.S. and Iran, let alone save the JCPOA?
I think you just answered your own question, Manila. Again, the Europeans simply do not have the will, it seems, to buck the orders from Washington with the threats from Washington, and I just don't see them seeing what they need to do over the next couple of days to prevent the formal breach of the deal between
right.
the Iranians and everybody else.
Yeah, they've got a couple of days before the sun sets on that term.
Yeah.
Now, ahead of his G20 arrival, Trump went on this tirade on Fox Business and said, quote, European nations were set up in order to take advantage of the U.S. And then he also ragged on Vietnam, saying that in terms of exploiting the U.S., that Vietnam's worse than China. How is this kind of rhetoric, Jim, going to gin up cooperation at this summit?
Well, I think he's counting on the fact that we are dealing with weaklings, so that if you threaten them and insult them, you bully them enough, they'll do what they're told. And most of the time, that actually works with people like this. I think he's got their number. Now, some people would hope that maybe what he's really trying to do is disrupt some of these relationships. You badmouth NATO, and NATO will fall apart or something like that. I don't see the evidence of that. What I see is that he thinks this is part of his bluster and make a deal strategy to insult a weaker opponent.
And it'll lead to the outcome that Trump wants.
At the very least, it will lead them to not taking any action to obstruct what it is we want to do, whether we'll get them actively on board. He knows if it comes to war with Iran, it's an American operation. So-called coalition of the willing is a joke.
All right, we will leave it right there. As always, appreciate your expertise on this stuff. Jim Jatras, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.